It was late, like that quiet part of Sunday night where the house is technically asleep, but you're still awake for no good reason. The kitchen light was on, just the small one over the sink, and I was standing there in socks scrolling through my phone. I already knew the number before the app loaded. I always did. That was the strange part. There was no spike of panic anymore, no stomach drop. Just recognition. Like seeing the same crack in the ceiling you've stopped meaning to fix. I remember thinking how calm I felt about it. And that calm bothered me more than the balance. The debt didn't feel urgent. It felt familiar. It had blended into the background of my life. Like the hum of a fridge you only notice when it stops. I told myself I'd deal with it later, the same way I always did. Later kept moving. I stayed right there. I used to think minimum payments were a kind of proof. Proof I was handling things. Proof I wasn't irresponsible. The email would come in. I'd pay the $120, and I'd feel this small wave of relief, like I'd passed some invisible test. What I didn't do was sit with what that actually meant. A $4,800 balance at around 22% interest. Paying the minimum every month. That's not months. That's years. That's thousands of dollars I don't remember agreeing to spend. And the uncomfortable part wasn't the math. The math was simple. The uncomfortable part was how good it felt to stop thinking once I made the payment. This is the part I didn't want to look at first. Not the debt itself, but how grateful I was for a system that let me feel responsible without actually changing anything. At some point, the debt stopped feeling like a separate thing. It just blended in. Rent, phone bill, internet, card payment, same mental category. Just another number that left my account every month. I didn't connect it to anything anymore. Not the trip, not the repair, not the random stretch where I was swiping a little faster than usual. It became abstract. I'd look at the statement and feel this vague confusion, like reading a receipt from a past version of myself I barely remembered. And that confusion carried weight, because when you can't remember what the debt is for, it's harder to feel motivated about it. I remember telling myself it was fine because it was predictable. $430 every month like clockwork. Predictable started to feel like stable. Stable felt safe. Even though all it really meant was I was reliably paying for decisions I'd already emotionally moved on from. I think a lot about upgrades. Not big ones. The small, reasonable ones. The slightly nicer option, the version that's only $10 more, or $20. I used to hit that button without hesitation, especially if it was going on a card. It didn't feel like debt. It felt like a preference. What finally stuck with me was adding it up one afternoon without any drama. $35 extra a month. That's nothing, right? Until it's $420 a year. 5 years later, it's a weekend somewhere I never went. And that realization didn't hit like guilt. It hit like this soft disappointment. I remembered how often I told myself I deserved the upgrade because I worked hard. That logic never had an expiration date. The card made it easy to never feel the trade-off. The cost just drifted forward, waiting for a version of me who was always supposed to be better equipped to handle it. There's a weird comfort in knowing exactly how much you owe and choosing not to think about it anyway. I lived there longer than I want to admit. It wasn't ignorance. I wasn't confused. I knew the balances. I just didn't sit with them. I'd open the app, glance and close it fast, like checking the weather and deciding not to go outside. I told myself I'd really look later. Later became a habit. What makes that uncomfortable now is realizing nothing stayed frozen just because I wasn't paying attention. The numbers kept moving. Interest kept showing up. Time kept doing its thing. Debt doesn't need your attention to grow. That was the part I didn't fully absorb back then. Avoidance didn't protect me. It just made the growth quieter. I used to sort debt into neat mental boxes: good debt, bad debt, responsible debt, dumb debt. It made everything feel organized. A car loan felt responsible, necessary, adult. Until I looked at it closely, $9,000 financed. A few years later, almost $3,000 more paid just for the privilege of spreading it out. That's when the labels started to feel flimsy. The emotional weight wasn't regret about the car. I needed it. It was the realization that labeling something normal made me stop asking questions. Normal shut down curiosity. And debt doesn't need recklessness to trap you. It does just fine with reasonable decisions repeated long enough. That's what I didn't see at first. I thought danger would feel louder. Payday used to feel like oxygen, that brief moment where everything loosened, and then almost immediately, it was gone. Not spent, assigned. Rent took its share, bills lined up, debt stepped forward calmly like it had a reservation. I didn't feel robbed, I felt resigned. That's what stuck with me. I remember telling myself this was temporary, just a few months until things smoothed out. But months have a way of stacking quietly. The paycheck stopped feeling like income. It felt like a hallway the money passed through on its way somewhere else. When that shift happens, debt stops feeling like a phase. It starts feeling structural, like part of the building. There was a moment when I realized I didn't remember what zero felt like anymore. Not emotionally, financially. I caught myself thinking a $300 balance was basically nothing. That thought scared me more than a big number ever did, because it meant my reference point had moved. What used to feel heavy now felt light. And that shift didn't come from one big mistake. It came from adapting, from adjusting expectations a little at a time. Each accommodation felt reasonable on its own. Together, they rewired my sense of normal. That adaptability is useful in a lot of areas of life. With debt, it's dangerous. You don't feel trapped. You feel adjusted. Interest is one of those things that feels abstract until you let it sit in real numbers. One card alone was costing me about $1,100 a year in interest. That's groceries. That's months of gas. And month to month, it didn't feel dramatic. $92 here, easy to ignore. Over 10 years, that's 5 figures that didn't buy anything. That realization didn't make me angry, it made me tired. Because it wasn't some scam or surprise. It was boring. And boredom is what lets it keep going. Nothing about interest demanded my attention, it just kept showing up. Quietly collecting rent on my past. I used to think consistency meant responsibility. I never missed a payment, ever. I was reliable, on time, predictable. And that felt like success for a long time. What I didn't notice was that nothing was improving. The balances stayed. The pattern held. Consistency started to look less like progress and more like maintenance. That realization landed heavy. Debt loves reliable people, it thrives on them. People who show up quietly and don't ask too many questions. I saw myself in that, and it wasn't flattering. Not because I was careless, but because I was comfortable. Most debt conversations happen during emergencies, layoffs, medical bills, big mistakes. But most of my debt didn't come from anything dramatic. It came from ordinary days, normal weeks, months that didn't stand out at all. That's what made it hard to interrupt through it. There was never a clear moment where I thought, this is where it went wrong. It just accumulated in the background of life. That recognition carried a strange weight. If there's no obvious crisis, there's no obvious moment to step in. The pattern survives because nothing ever feels urgent enough to stop it. I spent a long time waiting for things to calm down. Once work settled, once expenses eased, once life felt less chaotic. The problem was, things never really calmed down. They just changed shape. There's always something. That realization didn't come with panic. It came with acceptance. Waiting for the perfect moment kept me parked in the same one. Debt didn't need chaos to grow. It just needed patience. And I had plenty of that. I used to think of my spending self and my debt-paying self as two different people. One impulsive, one disciplined. That separation made it easier to feel okay about both. What finally clicked was realizing they were the same person, just at different times of day, the same week, sometimes the same afternoon. That realization was uncomfortable, a little embarrassing, but also clarifying. The debt didn't belong to some careless version of me. It belonged to all of me. Every rationalization, every justification, every moment I said, it's fine, just this once. I remember feeling proud after paying off one card. I really do. And then not long after, opening another. The net change was basically zero. But emotionally, it felt like progress. That's the trap. Small wins can keep you complacent if the pattern underneath doesn't change. I didn't see that at the time. I just felt relief. Relief is powerful. It can convince you things are moving when they're actually just circling. There's a specific sound a credit card app makes when a payment posts. I know it by heart. For a while, that sound meant relief, like exhaling after holding my breath. What it didn't mean was resolution. I confused movement with direction for a long time. As long as something was happening, I felt okay, even if it wasn't going anywhere. That realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, the way fatigue does. Debt narrows your world quietly, not by slamming doors, but by making things feel unrealistic. Trips you don't consider, plans you don't explore. I didn't think of it as missing out. I just adjusted my expectations downward. That adjustment came with a subtle kind of grief. Not dramatic, just a sense of things I stopped imagining. Debt didn't take those things away loudly. It just made them feel out of reach long enough that I stopped thinking about them. I remember defending my balances in conversations. Not aggressively, casually. Explaining why it was normal, why everyone had some debt. Looking back, I wasn't defending the debt, I was defending my comfort with it. Normalizing something doesn't make it harmless. It just makes it easier to live with. That realization stuck with me longer than I expected. It took a long time to admit the pattern wasn't breaking itself. That clarity didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly. One day I just saw it clearly. Seeing it didn't fix it overnight, but it changed how heavy it felt. There's a difference between carrying something blindly and carrying it consciously. The weight is the same. The experience isn't. Debt thrives in silence. In quick glances and closed apps, I think about what it would look like to actually sit with the numbers regularly, not to solve them, just to see them. That thought still makes me hesitate. Avoidance is comfortable. Clarity is honest. I spent a long time choosing comfort. When I added everything up, the interest alone came out to about $67 a week. Not life-ruining, just persistent. Following me through groceries and gas and quiet weekends at home. That number doesn't explode. It just lingers. I picture another late night. Kitchen light on. Phone face down this time. Nothing resolved. Just awareness. That feels different. Heavier in some ways. Lighter in others. I stand there for a moment, longer than usual, then turn the light off.